Well, thank you all for coming, and good afternoon and greetings from a rather wintry Aberdeen. I'm just at the moment having a few problems finding my slides. Oh, there we go. That's fine. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to talk to you today about some of the loans my colleagues and I have been involved in over the past few years. And I'll mainly be concentrating on our biggest loan today. That's the Pharaoh's loan, which is a joint venture with a number of partners. And so far it's been on display in Rosenheim in Germany, Victoria in British Columbia, and in Cincinnati in the States. And it's due to be exhibited at other venues in the USA starting in 2021 after a bit of a hiatus. It will then return to the UK and go on display in Birmingham. So anybody living in the West Midlands, now's your chance, before it travels to Auckland. I'll also touch upon some of our other loans, and we'll take a look at the paperwork involved, the conservation work carried out, and what we do when we install or deinstall an exhibition, and also look at some of the things that can go wrong and how we mitigate in these circumstances. So we're very fortunate to have a rich and diverse range of collections at the university, and collecting's been a part of the university's traditions certainly since the 1760s. And a purpose-built museum space was established at Marshall College way back in 1837. The collections at that time included objects from Africa, Polynesia and North America, as well as rare books and manuscripts, animal and geological specimens, and classical statues. These collection areas were greatly extended in the late 19th and early 20th century, and the university collections are of recognised national significance. Though the volume of loans has increased in recent years, the tradition of the university loaning objects is not new. For example, a portrait of Bishop Elphinstone and a medieval pot were loaned to the Scottish exhibition in Glasgow in 1911. Loans can be a single object or painting, or can stretch to dozens, hundreds of objects going on display at the exhibition. Loans can be international in nature or local. Recent local loans have included objects going on display at exhibitions at the Maritime Museum here in Aberdeen, scientific objects on display at the Grampian Transport Museum, and just today we had a loan of objects that will go on display at Provoskeen House, hopefully sometime next year. This slide you can see in the top left-hand corner a Ferguson still life that was recently on display in a gallery in the south of England. We've also at the top right-hand corner a nice little Bess amulet that was in Amsterdam and has now gone on its tours to Hanover, and will finally end up in Copenhagen before we see him back. There's also a nice Yoruba purse there that's in Hildesheim at the moment, and a fantastic shield from the Pacific that's going to go on display in Provoskeen House. The painting in the bottom right-hand corner, I'm afraid I can't remember who the painter is, but that was recently, it formed part of an exhibition on the Jacobites at the National Museum of Scotland. So I came across correspondence not so long ago from the 1960s, where it transpired that the wrong Yoruba object was flown out to the USA for a travelling exhibition. The exhibition, African Art and Afro-American Art, was put on by a young Yale researcher, Robert Farris Thompson, who was later to preside over numerous exhibitions of African art down through the years. He'd learned through oral allegations of a Yoruba chieftain symbol held by the university. So a loan was agreed, but unfortunately the wrong object was sent, then returned, and the correct one sent in its place. The object files for these objects show the Atlantic toing and froing that went on at the time, all by snail mail. So on the right-hand side is the correct object, and on the left-hand side you see an very old photograph which shows the object that they wanted, and also the object that was initially sent to them. So generally, a request for a loan is sent to the head of museums, or on occasion directly to the principal. The loan is then assessed, and then if in principle the objects are deemed suitable for loan, a formal request is then sent in. This will outline details of the exhibition, accompanied by a facilities report. On some occasions, an object will be deemed too fragile for display, or there may be concerns about how objects will be interpreted. Sometimes institutions will send the exhibition curator or another museum representative to scout out potential objects and items. Long lists of potential objects then become short lists after viewing. And I remember working with a curator from the Museum of Fine Arts in Budapest who wanted to select over 100 photographs from the collection at the National Media Museum, where I worked at the time, and we having to patiently whittle it down to a selection of 25. I mean, the process was really painstaking but fascinating. And the Pharaoh's exhibition selection produced a long list of well over 250 objects, and involved a number of visits to the store from the exhibition team and various Egyptologists. Here in the slide, we can see Dr. Tietze and Dr. Christian Bayer during one of those research visits, and the statue that's being photographed is Rahu Temple. So once the loan's been agreed, the selected objects are removed from the stores and condition checked and reports produced. Any objects that require interventive work will then be conserved, and treatment reports are also produced for these objects. The Pharaoh's loan involved checking well over 140 objects, producing condition reports for them all and treatment reports for objects that required conservation. Some of the objects required hours of conservation work, especially some of the metal objects and stone objects. And we were really fortunate to be allocated money to aid this conservation work. And the conservation assistant, Hannah Clark, was employed on a short-term contract to help with this work. Hannah's now a very valuable full-time member of the collections team. And here we can see Hannah on the left, who is removing corrosion products from a barbird. And then in the middle, a statue, and that's been treated to remove heavy brown overpainting. There was a real craze at one time to paint the Egyptian objects, the stone objects. So many of them, we had to remove that paint, which was hours of endless fun. And then on the right, that's Hannah and I pinning out bead netting on a mummy. So once the objects have been assessed and conserved, an exit form then needs to be produced. This gives details of the borrower, the length of the loan, and often evaluation of the objects. These and the condition reports accompany the objects throughout the loan. Objects over a certain value that are travelling outside the UK will require an export licence from the British Council, and anything bound for the USA or Russia immunity from seizure documentation as well. Proving the provenance of an object can be a really important part of this export license and requires the collection team to carry out research into a large number of objects. Arrangements are made for collection of the objects, and these usually will be couriered by art handling companies, with the borrowing institutions usually making the arrangements. Most often the objects are packed by the collections team at the university, but with the Pharaoh's loan, the art handlers from museums partner arrived with beautifully made crates, and they packed all the objects in these crates for us. Sometimes the objects are couriered without a museum representative, but often the courier will accompany the objects to ensure that the cargo hasn't been tampered with and has been kept in environmentally and security safe conditions. Art handlers are seasoned professionals and are used to taking alternative action when travel plans go awry, and they do go awry. And on international loans, they're utterly invaluable. When accompanying a loan, the golden rule is the objects come first. So, for example, a plane is only ever boarded when you know that the cargo has been loaded. When I first couriered loans, you could watch the cargo being loaded into the hold airside. Now, an art handler with special clearance will do this for you and send you proof. It might seem extreme, but on occasion you will be responsible for objects or artwork valued at millions of pounds. So there is rhyme to the reason. Sometimes a courier trip will be overland and can take a number of days to complete. Trips can often be overland through Europe and will take 2 or 3 days sometimes. One famous trip from Moscow had to go via Finland for security reasons, and that was a mega trip, I have to tell you, in the depths of winter. So when objects arrive at the destination, they are allowed to acclimatise for 24 hours before installation starts. Installing often takes a lot longer than anticipated, and sometimes the only thing you see during a long install are the walls of the exhibition space and then the walk back to your hotel late at night. It's not always like this, but if you're prepared for hold-ups, occasionally you are rewarded and you get to see a bit of the town or the city that you're in by daylight. In this slide, you can see a coffin being condition checked before it's going to be installed. And also on the right-hand side, the delicate installing of a coffin box. As I've said earlier, the Pharaoh's exhibition is a major international exhibition we've been involved in, and this has involved cooperation with other lending institutions in Hamm, Hildesheim and Berlin, exhibition logistics organised by an Austrian company, museums partner, and a wonderful team at Lokshoppen in Rosenheim, who amongst many other roles planned the exhibition layout and publicised the exhibition before it first opened at their exhibition space. We're incredibly grateful to all our partners. They've been fantastic to work with. And just to show you some of the things on display. So in this slide on the right hand side, you can see a Middle Kingdom wooden model of a boat from Beni Hasan. This slide just gives you an idea of some of the exhibition space. On the left, we've got lots of nice little alabaster pots, and on the right-hand side, lots of statues on individual plinths. Very heavy to lift the glass up. I'm glad I wasn't lifting the glass up to encase the object. Finally, on the right-hand side, some of the lovely shabties and shabty boxes from our collection. We were also extremely fortunate to get assistance from an anonymous donor, and this helped us to conserve the Beni Hasan coffin box. This was excavated by Professor Garstang during the winter of 1903 to 1904, and it's a wooden coffin from the Middle Kingdom period, richly decorated with architectural and religious scenes, and it was made for a man called Net. He was a superintendent of the throne. For me, this is a particularly special object because I was an archaeology student at the University of Liverpool, and I spent a lot of time in the archaeology library there, which is now the Garstang Museum. And Garstang served as an Egyptian archaeology lecturer for a number of decades there, well before my time, I hasten to add. So I have an affinity with objects associated with him. And I was at an alumni event at the university in February and was fortunate enough to see the coffin box that they have in their collection, also from Beni Hasan. The coffin box was in the coffin box was in the museum store in a very poor state, with the base of the box separated from the rest of the box. The object was assessed and it was decided that it needed specialist treatment, and we were really fortunate enough to have Jens Klocker come to the museum store to consolidate the box before it was transported to his studio, where further conservation work was carried out. Loans can be, I think, a brilliant way of fostering international cooperation, and being able to meet colleagues from other institutions is invaluable experience and really does help the cross-pollination of ideas, and it's fantastic to be able to raise the profile of the university's rich and diverse collections. The collections also get better known thanks to beautifully illustrated exhibition catalogues that are sometimes produced, and these can bring new or renewed interest in the collections. Objects going out on loan and the publicity surrounding these loans can lead to the collections team here at the university welcoming researchers who in pre-COVID times have come to study objects. The close working relationship the close working relationship we have with a museum in Hildesheim has now fostered links also with the University of Göttingen, and consequently more objects are due to be loaned for an exhibition in Berlin curated by Dr. Rafid Saeed, a Coptic specialist at the university. Do things go wrong? Well, yes, once in a while they do. And that's when it's vital to have somebody there to modify mounts and displays, carry out remedial conservation, record damage in transport, and agree to any last-minute changes. Our current loan of objects to venues in Japan, which forms part of the Mummies of the World exhibition, included the coffin of an Egyptian child. This highly decorated Ptolemaic coffin was slightly, but thankfully not significantly damaged during transit. The conservator at the install had to assess this damage, and then a report was compiled to claim against insurance so that conservation work can be carried out. The packing had to be radically altered, and this was overseen by the conservator during the de-install. Finally, just to say, loans work is incredibly labour intensive, but incredibly rewarding, and would not be possible without the assistance of the head of Museums and Special Collections, Neil Curtis, and the small but brilliant collections team of Abir and Hannah Clark. And the special mention must must be made for the assistance Louise Wilkie provided before she left and helping to get the Pharaoh loan up and running. Without the dedication of the collections team, none of this would be possible. So I leave you with an image of a fellow conservator, Claudia Schindler, who was working on the black coffin, which also went into the Pharaoh's exhibition. This is from the collection of the Roma and Palazius museums, and a beautiful Coptic magic spell from the university's collection, which is currently on display over there. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you so much, Caroline. That was fantastic. It was a very interesting insight into a little bit about what you guys actually do and how you get these things around the world. So we'll open up for questions now. And if you have a question, please just type it into the chat box at the side, and we'll get kicked off with that. We don't have any in yet, but we'll give everyone a minute or so to get their thinking caps on and get them added in. I've actually got a question I can kick off with as well. Just something that came to me. I heard something a while ago, and now I'll probably be completely wrong when I say I think it's the Elgin marbles. Is that right? Mm. Is that right? In the British Museum. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I read an article ages ago about kind of the controversy around that and how Greece wants them back, and the British Museum has them still, and about the where we stand on that. Is it right that the museum keeps it, or should it be returned? What's your kind of opinion on that? Because I guess museums wouldn't exist without sharing these items with each other. So it'd be interesting to see what you think.
Well, that used to be a classic. I don't know if it still is, but back in the day, my first job was at the British Museum, and the first question was always, "What's your position on the Elgin marbles?" And you always had to sort of say, "Well, it would be good because they are the property of the Greek people, but because of conditions there, they should remain in the British Museum for the foreseeable future." I think they should go back, but that's just my opinion. I think they can keep them in good condition. Everybody's got the facilities now. Maybe not the money, but I'm sure there's a few rich shipping magnates out there still, so you could maybe sponsor it.
Thank you. It's an interesting point. So we've got a few questions that have come in. So I'll start with, let me see. So Moira's asking, when can we see the pharaohs in Aberdeen?
We did have a small exhibition about one of the objects that is on display. That was about an Egyptian woman and her coffin, and it was all done in 3D, and it was fantastic. We don't have enough space, that's the problem. But I think once the objects come back, watch this space, and we'll get some of these objects out on display. Definitely, it's something that Neil, the head of museums, has been talking about. So yeah, it won't be for a few years, but it's coming.
Super, thank you. Chloe's asking, what's been your favourite exhibition that you've worked on?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Maybe there's a couple. I went to the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, and that was really cool, mainly because I saw a Degas on the wall, and when I was a student I had that poster on my bedroom wall, and to see it in real life, it was just amazing, totally amazing. But I think maybe this, because the Pharaoh's exhibition has been the largest, maybe this one will stay in the memory for a long time.
Great, thank you. Jen is asking, how many of the university's objects are currently on loan?
Oh, well, we've got about 140 odd in the Pharaoh loan, And then we've got some scientific instruments in Germany, so that's another 30. I'd say well over 200 objects are out there somewhere. We know where they all are.
I was going to say, I hope you can travel.
Yeah, we've got a list. It's fine.
And we've had a comment as well from Susan, who says thank you, and that she never knew how much was involved in preparing items for loans, and didn't realise that loans went locally and internationally. So there you go. So Morna and Peter are asking, what is going to be exhibited in Birmingham and when, please?
So that will be the Pharaohs exhibition. So that will be the 140 odd objects from our collection, and then also objects from museums in Hildesheim, Berlin and Hamm. And that should, now dates have been changing obviously because of various lockdowns, but I think we're looking at 2023, but don't quote me. It might be 2022. Sorry, I can find out for sure, but it won't be next year. It's probably the year after. So I'm pretty sure it's 2022. But it'd be a fantastic exhibition, and there'd be hundreds of objects, and lots of interactive displays. That's provided we can touch things again. But yeah, fantastic.
Great, thank you so much. So June is asking, is there any chance we can see these objects in Aberdeen once we're allowed to move about again? And if so, where would they be kept?
Well, we do have quite a big Egyptian collection, and they are currently in the store, mostly. And we've only got small. We've got a gallery space in the library, and also a small museum up at King's on the campus. But we just don't have anywhere to display them at the minute. So there is talk of the old museum here at Marshall being refurbished and disabled access being provided, so we can open up the galleries again. I mean, hopefully sometime in the not too distant future that will be something that happens. But yes, we will, once the objects in this loan come back, we will be making sure that some of them go on display somewhere. I mean, possibly, maybe it might be something that we can do in conjunction with Aberdeen Art Gallery and Museums. So watch this space. Yeah.
Exciting, thank you very much. So Anne is asking, have you overseen any return of objects to their original country from the Aberdeen collections?
Well, I haven't personally, but Neil Curtis has. He's been involved in the repatriation of a number of items, including Maori skulls and a Chilcot blanket. And he is very keen on certain objects being looked at in terms of repatriation. You know, it's a very sensitive topic, but certainly he is in favour of some objects being returned to when requests have been made for these objects to go back. Yeah.
Thank you. And kind of on the same topic, Susan's asking, if the Elgin marbles should go back, what's the argument about, say, the Yoruba chief? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Yoruba chief object going back to its place of origin.
Well, that's a bit of a sensitive subject at the minute, so I can't really go into that. So, but yes, I mean we are constantly reviewing things and looking at repatriation of objects. Yeah. So.
Great, thank you very much. Lisa, I wonder how it feels to see collections material in a new location, do you find you then see the material in a new light?
Oh, that's a good, yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about doing this. I mean, it is painstaking and sometimes, dare I say it, tedious to prepare loans. But the great thing is you get to look at these objects anew, both when you condition checking them and when you're working on them, and then when they are displayed in new environments. Yeah, it can give you a really different sort of outlook on them. Like, for example, the Beni Hasan coffin box, once it was lit up and you could see all the decoration so beautifully displayed, it just heightened the experience of seeing it. Yeah, so it can just give you a different outlook and a different insight into some of these objects. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Susan is saying, in the mid-70s, I love visiting the museum displays in Marshall, and are some now on display in Kings?
There were some in Kings. We used to use Kings for student exhibitions, and also it was also used by various museum lecturers who were putting on, anthropology lecturers in particular, who put on exhibitions. So, for example, Arctic objects from the Arctic were on display a few years ago, and then there was an exhibition on Macpherson, who collected a lot of objects in Mexico. So it's being used, but I think what they're proposing to turn Kings into an exhibition space that's dedicated to all things old Aberdeen. That's the current plan anyway. We desperately need somewhere else to display these things. We've got so many objects. But yes, it's been, and of course we have the Zoology Museum, and just had an interesting conversation with one of my colleagues about the possibility in the future of using the Zoology Museum to actually display objects that you might not normally see in that context. So watch this space. We might have some movements afoot there. So.
Super, thank you so much. Let's see what the next one is. Hannah is asking, what's the most challenging aspect of installation?
I think the most challenging thing is when sometimes you have to stand your ground and insist that you're not happy with a mount, for example, and that it needs changing, or the light levels are wrong, and it's having the confidence to say to the exhibition installation team and to the museum staff at the venue that you're at that things need modifying and changing, and it's just developing to be able to do that, because I think a lot of people that work in collections are by nature quite shy and don't like confrontation. So yeah, that I think sometimes that's the most challenging thing, just to be able to have that confidence to stand up for the object.
Absolutely. So the next question is from Amanda, and she's saying, is the Physics Museum still in existence in the Fraser Noble building?
There is a small display there. It's and to my shame, it's rather neglected, because we do actually have some fantastic natural philosophy objects, and we have an honorary curator, John Reed, who looks after a lot of these objects, and the history behind them is fantastic. Yeah, there's been talk of changing the display in the Fraser Noble building and bringing it into the 21st century. So yeah, it's still there.
Great, thank you very much. Moira's asking, where were the exhibitions in your slides? Because they look like lovely spaces.
They were mainly Lokshoppen, which is an exhibition space in Rosenheim in Bavaria. And it's an old train station or an old turning yard that they've converted. And it's a huge space, but it's also a really weird, awkward space. So it's sort of like semicircular in design, but they've fitted it out really well. When Hannah and I went to install in there, we kept getting lost initially because the building shape was so odd. But yeah, it's a really nice building. And Rosenheim, I can highly recommend Rosenheim. It's great beer and sausages. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's see who's next. Anne is next, I think. Yes. Anne is asking, which object produced the most nerve-wracking moments while it was being transported for loan?
Most nerve-wracking. Well, one of the most nerve-wracking ones was in Moscow when we were loading up objects in the depths of winter, and Moscow has a bit of a reputation, and it's the first time I've had to watch objects being loaded into a van with armed guards around it. So that was pretty nerve-wracking. Sometimes you're not you like to think that anything that you pack is gonna come out the other end but sometimes there's just certain objects, just because they're so fragile, that you're not 100% sure that they're going to withstand transport. And it's always such a relief when you open the crate and everything's fine. 99 times out of 100, everything's grand. It's just that, but you're always sort of, the trepidation when you lift the lid.
I can imagine that would be very, very nerve-wracking. So Jen is saying, even though we can't always display a large number of our objects in Aberdeen, having a rich collection means that other museums around the world want to borrow them. So would you say that these loaned objects act to spread the word about our university around the world?
Yes, I like to think so. Yes, I think this is one of the really important things about exhibitions, is to get our objects out there. I mean, it's just it's incredible. When I first started working here, I mean, I knew the collection by reputation, but I had no idea what sort of objects were here. I mean, the alumni that have gone out and brought back objects, and I know there's all that colonial association, and whenever you look at an object, you have to think of the time it was collected. But it's just absolutely amazing, the things that alumni brought back. Yeah, brilliant collections. Grant Bay, who was in Egypt, brought back hundreds of objects, and it's nice that they are going out there. And I think as well, it's good that people in other countries get to see these things. Yeah.
June's asking, has the university ever lent an object that they didn't get back? And if so, what can you do about it? Not just from an insurance point of view, but who do you have to support to?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. Yes. So anytime a loan goes out, and I've seen this with old loan forms from the sort of the 50s and 60s. There is this paper trail, and there are lots of conditions on the back of loans. I mean, I suppose it's something that could potentially happen, but it's never happened, and it's never happened to anybody that I know. But that's not to say it couldn't happen. Yeah, I mean, we have. Again, there was a case of this back in the 1960s. seven. Well, actually, they don't know exactly when it happened, but a couple of objects were taken from the store. This is long before any of us worked here. I hasten to add, back in the 50s and 60s, I think a couple of objects went missing and they've never been seen again. But there's only 2 or 3 that have been recorded as possibly stolen. The rest, thankfully, are still where they should be. So
let's hope it stays that way. I've actually got one more I was going to ask. Have you ever been working on an exhibition anywhere and thought for whatever reason it wasn't going to be done on time? Like something didn't arrive, or you were just getting very close to the wire, and if so, what happened with that?
Well, Hannah and I'll know all about that, because when the Pharaohs exhibition moved to Victoria in British Columbia, a lot of the exhibition furniture was shipped out by boat, and I think it met with very inclement weather, and a lot of the cases were smashed. A lot of the glass fittings were smashed, and they had to remake them, and it was down to the last few minutes. And I think a lot of it, exhibition teams will know this as well, that you often think it's not going to happen, and then all of a sudden it just sort of comes together at the last minute. So, and that can be in a small exhibition or a sort of major international exhibition. The only time that I haven't seen that is in Japan. The Japanese are so efficient, and so everybody else, all the rest of the world. But it all comes together really, really well wherever you are, and most of the time it's you do sort of when you're down to the last sort of half a dozen objects, it's always a relief. Yeah.
It sounds very stressful. So next, for conservation as well, or does it vary?
Can you say that again? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sure. If a museum requests an object, do they pay for conservation as well as shipping, or does it vary?
It varies, yes. It depends on the lending institution. Certainly with the Pharaohs exhibition, we were given a pot of money to carry out conservation work. Normally, if it's just a handful of objects, then we will pay for the conservation ourselves. If a special crate is required, then often the borrowing institution will provide a crate. So we will try and keep the prices down, and use crates that we already have, but in certain circumstances we'll get them to provide us with a brand new case. So most of the time it's sort of built into working here, that there's factored into the costs of having a conservator and a collections team, is that there will be some conservation work that we provide for museums that are borrowing our objects. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Questions. I think we'll be getting a bit of feedback here. Let me see. The only thing that I would like to flag is that Lisa pointed out that for online access, she says, remember, anyone can search the library catalogue, and new museums catalogue will be launched very soon. And catalogues include some images, and we're hoping to upload more before too long. So that's just something that everyone can keep in mind if they're wanting to have a look online at the collections. Keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, I think that's it for questions. If anyone's got anything else, you've got another 10-20 seconds to get it typed in there before we wrap up. We'll give you just one more chance. Laura's asking, is there an object in the Aberdeen collection you wouldn't want to loan out?
Yes, anything that's sort of deemed sensitive. So if an object is deemed sacred to a certain group, then we would probably not loan it unless it was to that group and they had a particular reason for wanting that object. Yeah. There are certain objects that haven't been loaned because they are sensitive. Yeah.
Susan's asking the shrunken head, question mark?
I wouldn't like to see that on display anymore, put it that
way. That's fair. Kate is asking, what's your favourite object in the collection?
It changes. At the minute, I'm really into the African sculptures. I've got too many. Oh, and I love the tiki. There's a tiki from the Pacific collection, which is absolutely gorgeous, and it has mother of pearl eyes, and it's the most beautiful green. There's a jade buffalo that's from China that's superb. It's super heavy. Nobody's ever going to run away with that. Yeah, it just changes. There's so many really nice things.
I can imagine it must be impossible to pick from all of that. Yeah. So I think that's it for questions then. Anita has just asked where the session will be able to be viewed after this. So just to let you know, we have recorded it. We will put it on our own YouTube channel, and we'll actually email it out to everyone that's here just now. They'll get an email tomorrow with a link to it. But before we head off, I will put the link to the YouTube channel in the chat, just in case Chloe's already on it. My colleague Chloe has already pasted the link in there for you guys. So you can visit our channel, and it's got all our talks and events that we've done so far is on there as well. So you can access it that way. But I would like to say a huge thank you to Caroline for giving us her time this afternoon, and to the rest of the museum's team who are here as well, that have been a great help in getting this set up and organised. It's hugely appreciated. I thought it was fascinating, so thank you very much. Cool. And I hope everybody has a lovely evening, and we'll hopefully see you at another event soon. Thank you very much.